Hello, friends. Welcome to the Nexus Podcast. I'm your host, James Dice. Each week, I fire questions at the leaders of the smart buildings industry to try to figure out where we're headed and how we can get there faster without all the marketing fluff. I'm pushing my learning to the limit, and I'm so glad to have you here following along. This episode is a conversation with Thano Lambrinos, Senior Vice President of Digital Buildings, Experiences, and Innovation at QuadReal Property Group. He's joined by Edi Demaj, co-founder of KODE Labs. We talked about QuadReal's smart building strategy generally, and then we took a deep dive into the concept of a building operating system and why QuadReal chose KODE Labs to be theirs. This was a fascinating look at the next generation of software for buildings through the eyes of one of the leading building owners in our industry. Without further ado, please enjoy the Nexus Podcast with QuadReal and KODE Labs. Thano and Edi, welcome to the show. Thano, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Hey, everyone. My name's Thano Lambrinos. I am responsible for our digital buildings, customer experience, and innovation practice at QuadReal Property Group. For those who aren't terribly familiar with the firm, we currently manage just over $61 billion in assets, a good majority of that being real estate, split right now about 50-50 between Canada, where I am right now here in Toronto, across the country, as well as internationally throughout the US, in Europe, Asia, and Australia, and in other parts of the world. To give you some idea of the size of the organization from a real estate perspective, that $60-ish billion translates into around 36 million square feet of office, around 9 million feet of retail, almost 90 million feet of industrial space, 53,000 residential units, and another 20,000 student housing units, and growing every day. I'm sure those numbers are out of date if they were even published this morning. So 1,200 employees globally and responsible for the digital transformation strategy across the domestic, Canadian, and international portfolio. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. So what were you doing before QuadReal? Can you give us a little summary of your background?
Yeah, for sure. I came from a non-traditional, my background is somewhat non-traditional, and it's in how it came to be and land in real estate and technology. I actually came from the sub-trades. I worked for electrical and mechanical contractors on the construction side and was exposed to technology through the public-private partnership model of building and deploying infrastructure here in Canada. We were building hospitals, building courthouses and rail systems and things of that nature. And the reason that technology really started for me at those projects was because the government at the time, Infrastructure Ontario, these other bodies, these other groups had what they called a PSOS, or a project specific output specification, that required outlined what they wanted the building to do in a hospital environment, allowing the patient to have a bedside terminal that gave them health records, but also entertainment, and also let them control the temperature and the blinds and the lighting in their room and call the nurses and things of that nature, and pushed it down onto the consortiums to have them deliver it. So there was, we're talking 2006, 2007, 2008, when this really started for me. And at the time, it was just a whole lot of identifying software solutions in various different companies that could come together, and integrators that could make these solutions stand up. So from that introduction to it, I left the trades and went into general contracting work for a large firm here in Canada, and was working with some real estate customers, QuadReal being one of them. And they asked me to jump over the fence and run the digital strategy for them directly.
Very cool. Edi, who are you? Can you introduce yourself and give us a little intro to KODE?
What's going on, James? Thanks for having me. So Edi Demaj, I'm one of the co-founders here at KODE Labs. As far as what KODE Labs is and what we do, we're a smart building platform that helps normalize all building systems, including any IoT, so it's not just core BMS, but it's any IoT or really any other system, access, cameras, whatever it may be, integrating it into a single pane of glass to help visualize, control, and analyze using this holistic approach. So we're not stuck to any one area where we're optimizing or doing any one thing based on just one variable or two variables. The idea is that anything that has any means of communicating can be integrated into a platform that can normalize that data and then use it to enable a variety of different use cases across, in a scalable way across portfolios, not just one building or two buildings at a time.
Cool, great intro. So, give me a little history on KODE Labs. When did you guys start it, and what's it grown up to today?
And so, Edgewood and I were the two co-founders here at KODE Labs. We both have been in and around real estate space for a while, really, I'd say our whole adult lives. Edgewood was on the integration side, bringing building systems together, that side of it. And I come from the connectivity side. I co-founded a company prior to KODE Labs called Rocket Fiber, where we were top 3 fastest internet providers in North America for 6 years in a row. And what we did there is we essentially build that underlying infrastructure that enables everything to live on top of, right? We exited that in 2020, but 2017, Patrick and I were looking at the space, and I managed a bunch of real estate, and we bought and done real estate development prior to that with Patrick. We always felt like everything we did in and around real estate was just really manual, very expensive. And in particular, with regard to building integrations, nobody could quantify the deliverables. It was always you could tie this, that, and the other. It would take 17 months to do, cost millions of dollars. And then when you have to go to ownership and actually tell them that, hey, this is a cool to have, what they want to know is, am I generating more revenue? Are you lowering my costs? Or is this just a nice to have kind of a thing? And for a long time, for us, it felt like it was one of those nice to have, very hard things to pitch. And we thought we could do it better. So we've started other companies prior to this and in the software space as well. So what we did is we said, hey, we have a team of people that have this variety of different experiences that if we could bring together, we could really build something cool that is a plug and play that I'm sure we'll get more into. So in late 2017, we started putting a team together with some key people and started building this vision, this platform that started with us too, but really all the people that have been attached to it are just as much founding members of the company as Etchett and I are. And then they kind of took it over, and then they've been building it, and it's been an incredible ride since then. And we're now about 74 or 5 people and adding every day. So not the numbers that Thano was talking about, but I with 70 some people, I'm losing the numbers here by 1 or 2 every week, I feel. And doing business in all over US, Canada, Australia, UK, and expanding around Europe as well now.
Cool. Yeah, this podcast will come out in early 2022, and QuadReal will have more buildings, and you guys will have more employees, I'm sure. So this will be out of date when it's published. But the impetus for this conversation was Thano's presentation at Realcomm, which I very much enjoyed, and told him so when we met. And we thought, might as well talk about it, unpack it a little bit more in the context of this software layer that you guys are adding on, Edi. So why don't we start with can you give Thano an overview of the QuadReal smart building strategy to give people some context?
Yeah, for sure. So we felt very early on that it was important to define what, to Edi's point, what this promise of smart buildings was actually going to deliver us as a real estate owner operator, and what promise it was going to deliver to our tenants. So we spent a bunch of time early on with various different stakeholders across the business, in leasing, in development, in construction, in property operations, in investment management and asset management, and sustainability, to identify what was important to them and what their key business drivers were. And we came up with 7 that we use as kind of the decision-making points for any digital projects or any use cases we look to stand up in the built environment. The 7 are all around reducing costs and improving productivity, reducing energy consumption and lowering our carbon footprint, talking about healthy buildings and wellness, which is extremely important, because it was always extremely important, but is now especially important because of COVID. Talking as previously mentioned about reducing energy and carbon, we've got some very ambitious net zero targets, as many do now, that we look and hope to realize. The reduction of risk, both operational and cyber risk, and the differentiation of experiences for the user being one of the more critical ones, as well as the opportunity to change the business model a bit and leverage technology to find new revenue streams. So those were the drivers that we got started with. And from there, we developed what we needed to develop in order to implement in a repeatable and a scalable way. And that is what we call our digital building playbook. So these playbooks contain all of those aspirational use cases and user journeys, but also we've gone a step deeper and have actually written specifications and requirements of all of the technologies that are going to be required in the built form, whether operational back of house or whether front of house customer facing, to deliver on all of those use cases, all the way through to standing up and commissioning. And there's an audit trail back from the use cases through the specifications, the deployment of those specifications, and the implementation of those specifications. We needed to do this because the current construction methodology, the current methodology of retrofitting buildings, is not conducive to the economical deployment of technology in the built environment. So by doing this, we've created a repeatable and standardized playbook that allows us to do these things at scale at a cost that we're able to deliver them at. The next layer, if we look at it as a series of layers, and probably the foundational layer is one of connectivity. Edi talked a little bit a moment ago about what he did at Rocket Fiber and how that was an enabling layer to everything that sat on top. So over the past, call it 18 months or so through COVID, even, we've deployed fiber infrastructure, converged building networks, and have integrated our systems both from a back of house and a front of house perspective at all of our commercial buildings across Canada. We've standardized it and are deploying it in all of our new developments, and we're looking at retrofitting in our other asset classes as well. So that foundation was critical to connect systems and to expose data that we would then normalize with groups like Edi's at KODE to be able to surface it, visualize it, and be able to do more advanced analytics on. So from the foundational layer, the next of connectivity, the next layer that was of critical importance was making the data available to us a bit more granular. So we started deploying a number of IoT sensors, primarily in the space of occupancy and people counting, because we've had buildings for hundreds and hundreds of years, but for the longest time, we've had no idea how those buildings were actually used, how those spaces were used, how people were traversing through the space, and what they were using them for. So that was a key use case to integrate with HVAC and lighting systems for comfort and energy, but also to integrate with security systems for obvious reasons, to understand where people are, to optimize for cleaning, and just really understand how people are using our spaces so that we can design them better. In addition to that, there was a number of other IoT technologies we deployed. Indoor environmental quality, which, as you know, is of critical importance, as I mentioned earlier, with the healthy buildings movement. Leak detection for loss reduction. Floods are the new fire, unfortunately, and we're seeing this get worse every day. So being able to mitigate those issues are of huge importance. Consumable reduction, things like waste and toilet paper and hand towels and hand sanitizer and things of that nature. So the less of it goes to the landfill, we use all of it, and we optimize the way that we clean, and adding a layer of mobile access on top of all of our systems so that we create the credential. The phone is your credential. So that's the best way for you to access a space physically or virtually. A couple more things and then I'll stop rambling. But the layer on top of that before we get to KODE, I'll close out with our friends at KODE here. On top of that we built was our own digital platform. So everyone talks about tenant engagement and tenant experience. We canvassed the entire market and realized that there were some good solutions out there, but they were pretty expensive. And when we looked at what we could do based on the scale that we had and the cost it would take for us to build these solutions out, and the fact that we could control our own roadmap and our own destiny, it became very appealing to start looking at doing this ourselves. We are not a software development house. All we've done is create a thin layer that allows fantastic services like KODE and like food and beverage services and like other systems to appropriately integrate them in so that we can surface them to the customer in a unified way, and then add on top some other functionality like event booking and building information and communications and other things of that nature. So we created QuadReal Plus for ourselves, which is now deployed across our commercial portfolio, soon to be deployed across our residential portfolio as well. And also we've created a thin layer of digital workplace management that allows us to bridge the gap between landlord and tenant and enhance the services that we deliver to our office tenants. So those are two bespoke kind of customized solutions we've created within QuadReal that we're utilizing on ourselves with our tenants and also with our joint venture partners. And last but not least, our friends at KODE that are part of that top layer, kind of next to that customer platform layer, if you will, that allows us to bring in all of the building system data, visualize it, do command and control, eliminate a bunch of disparate head ends, save costs there, change the operating model, really look at the way that we operate our buildings and change that from a one building operator per 150,000 square feet. And maybe we can stretch that, and maybe we can repurpose our people to manage larger portfolios if they're very highly technically skilled. This also allows us to surface other services to customers and overlay analytics and machine learning and AI to drive efficiencies, to drive cost reduction, but also drive the comfort and the health and wellness in the environment. So that was a long diatribe, but that kind of in a nutshell gives you a sense of what we're doing here at QuadReal.
The reason I like talking to you is because the way that you just described that, walked everyone through everything that could be like 12 hours worth of a podcast. And I feel like I got a really good overview just from the couple minutes there. You started with a business case, then use cases, and then you're walking through infrastructure and then outcome, or the actual technologies that sit on top of the infrastructure. And that aligns so clearly with the way that we teach things in our foundations course. So I appreciate that.
I was lucky enough to present to our board last week, and if I couldn't distill the message and the strategy in 10 minutes, I'd have had a big problem. So, so that's a learned and practiced approach to describing digital and smart buildings to the real estate community.
Totally. Well, we could probably do an entire year's worth of Nexus podcasts on everything you just talked about, but we're going to zero in on just that one layer, which is, you guys call it integrated operations platform? Is that what you call it?
We call it our integrated building management platform.
Okay, integrated building management platform, which is where KODE comes in. So Edi, what does that mean to you? And I want to draw a parallel to this acronym that I see in the industry a lot today, which is building operating system. It's not my favorite. I really don't like it very much. Can we try to define out what this thing is? What are you guys developing, and what is a building operating system? It's not a very fair question, but we'll go for it.
Oh, that's fine. And I couldn't agree more with you with regard to use of acronyms and different terminologies. I think Thano touched on it at IBCon a little bit, but there's been a lot of talk about a lot of things for a long time. And the question now, I think, is what are we actually doing? And can we see, touch it, feel it, and actually stand behind what it is that we're, especially for us, vendors that are pitching the, QuadReal's and Streams and Oxfords and, Calic Fairview, whoever of the world. Can we see this thing, right? Because it's really easy to talk about use cases and so on. So our approach, and the reason we call our core, platform KODE OS, which is the operating system, is because our definition of an operating system is something that allows for others to pull from and do whatever it is that they need to do, but also offers all these different applications to enable whatever use cases you want. QuadReal has 7. There are other clients that have other things that need done. It needs to have the flexibility to allow for all those things to happen. Our approach, again, the reason we haven't made a whole lot of noise until about 12, 14, 16 months ago is because we went out there and we were working with a bunch of different clients and getting our products deployed. And we wanted to be able to show versus just talk, and our approach to talking with even potential clients or partners, is always, let's just jump right into an actual demo so you can see it, touch it, feel it, play with this thing, versus going through presentation slides. It's just not, we're talking about technology, and yes, we've in our industry, I think it's taken a bit. I think we're getting there with regard to, like, we've had a lot of dreams, but like to actually bring them to life has been a bit challenging and or costly and or both. And our approach is that once we deploy, like, you get a lot of companies that say, hey, we'd like to do a pilot. And our answer to that is, that's great, but how about like we do 7 of them all at the same time and have your building turned around in the next 14 days, literally all 7 of them, fully integrated, data normalized, give us whatever systems you have. You now have a platform where you're not piloting one building, but you're piloting this across 7 or 10 or whatever you want. And it always goes, how is that even possible? Our goal is not that you always use KODE Labs to deploy our platform. Quite literally before this call, I was told that, I think, Thano, one of your buildings, you have people that are now literally deploying the platform on their own. The idea, so anyway, to go back to your beginning of this is, it's having a platform that could be taught, that is simple enough to use and implement by anybody. It could be your partners that you've used in your portfolio forever, or it could be your building engineers, or it could be whoever is operating the building, your property management, whoever it may be, to have the ability to literally take what's been deployed in one building and implement it across a whole portfolio by following a set of directions or talking to our client experience team, client success team, which I say is of course I'm biased, but I think we have the best in class. And then last but not least, it's having internal to whoever owns this operating system that's being called, having a team that's structured in such a way where when we talk about, you hear a lot of like, we do ML and AI, we do energy savings, we do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, let me just literally go on LinkedIn and look at the structure of your team. And like, you have to be able to, like, these things don't just happen by, having, 1 or 2 people that could kind of talk and touch all these things. So anyways, our approach has been, if we're pitching it, it needs to have a quantifiable return to an owner or a manager of a building or portfolio. It needs to, like, they need to be able to like see it, touch it, feel it in a scalable way and in a timely manner, which helps be able to deliver this cost-effective solution. So that's our definition of an operating system.
Okay. So you're like, let's not try to define it. Let's just do it and show you.
Yeah. Like there's been a lot, again, like there's been a lot of talk, and there still is a lot of talk. And I think there's some phenomenal companies that are doing some amazing things in the space. I think our co-founder Edi actually said it in one of the other podcasts that 2022 will be the year of partnerships. I think we'll see a lot of companies come together and partner, actually realize that, look, like, maybe we're not competing with you. Our view at KODE Labs is that we could work with anybody, anywhere, because the platform is built. Like, if you truly have an operating system, you should not, like, we shouldn't have to pitch QuadReal on just like the one thing. Hey, Thano, let me just optimize your HVAC as an example. Like, if that's all we're doing, then we're out, because maybe he has something he's using. But it's being able to provide this holistic view and also be able to use data from all these different variables, which again has been talked about a lot. And I think there are some great optimization tools out there that optimize, one specific variable based on, 1 or 2 different data points. But to be able to take this holistic view, I mean, Thano touched on it on a lot a couple minutes ago here, but enabling an amazing experience and driving energy efficiency and reducing risk, like, those things can actually all happen together, because they happen in all other industries. Integrating an API is not rocket science. Like, there are companies that are literally flying rockets to like different planets. Like, integrating an API happens every day, all day, nonstop. To do plug and play, once you integrate something, you shouldn't, like, that shouldn't be like, from there on, like, you should be able to go and install 75 million access points or occupancy sensors or whatever you're trying to install. and they should just come up. Like this happens in every other space except for our space, where it's just this crazy complicated thing that people talk about. We are in this to simplify it and make it quantifiable. That's it.
So this concept is tough because we're not to where we have like the operating system in buildings yet, like a Windows or, Apple operating system yet. But do we have people?
KODE Labs.
Well, so yeah, that's why I wanted to talk to you guys about it. So, but hear me out. So this is where we've been in the industry so far. We have a bunch of people talking about operating systems, but I think the subtext is that we're not quite there yet, or what they were referring to an operating system as was not like the operating system on your computer. Then you have companies that are like doing, like you said, energy. Like I'm just going to throw Lucid, now Atrius, under the bus. They have the building OS, right? That's their patented name for their software, but it's it's utility bill benchmarking, right? That's not an operating system for a building. So what I'm hearing from you, like if we try to define it, and I'm always like trying to define acronyms for the industry, but like you're connecting to all the siloed base building systems, it sounds like, two-way communication between them. You're not just doing that in one building, it's a portfolio approach. So site level systems like Niagara, for instance, that this differentiates this from that, basically like, this is a cloud-based, cloud-first portfolio level approach. And it's built on providing applications for different people to accomplish different things, it sounds like. So it's not just throw all of your data onto a dashboard and say, good luck. It sounds like it's taking it beyond that and actually integrating the data and the control capabilities into people's actual workflows.
I think what was important. Yeah, I think what was important for us as we looked at this, James, is to your point, it couldn't even just be base building systems. We needed more than that, right? We needed the ability to integrate all of the different IoT sensors that we were deploying. We haven't done this yet, admittedly, but very soon we'll start to look at enterprise solutions and bringing in various different enterprise solutions into the fold and seeing, what data points from our, whether it's leasing systems or financial systems or, HR systems or what have you, that could be relevant in here as well. So we really needed a layer that was, as you mentioned, could provide two-way communication, command and control, but also could bring in sources of data from anywhere. Make sure that it was repeatable and scalable to the point that I don't have to go to code every time we want to make changes. We can have our building operators. In fact, once we get all of these APIs stood up, they could maybe do the next building themselves if they really wanted to, right? So this is the type of flexibility that we specified and required in our documents when we first started doing RFPs in this space, and where we befuddled much of the market because, to your point, their definition of a building operating system was my operating system that you have to pay me X amount of dollars a year to use, but only I can really update it. And I kind of select the partners and the integrations. And if you want something, I'll let you know if we were going to put it on our roadmap or not, and so on and so forth. So that was the key bit for us, is identifying a solution that would allow us to satisfy these things, that we could deliver at scale at a cost that I could go to asset management and investment management and build a case and tell them what we were looking to accomplish. And when they looked at the figures, they were like, okay, that's a reasonable amount of money. We're not talking about millions of dollars per building to stand a bunch of pieces of data up, visualized very pretty with a lot of colors and charts for outcomes unknown. So I think that's, that for us it needed to be we need to look at it as a true OS, a system that, I can hire somebody to help me with, or I can do it myself, or we can have power users that can create applications on the platform to do interesting things, or, identify whiz-bang algorithms that I can overlay and run simulations, and all of those types of things needed to be possible. And they're few and far between in the market as it stands.
Awesome. You mentioned the specifications layer or step to this, right? So when you and I met a couple of weeks ago, you talked about your utopian state. You basically said, I'm putting this utopian state out, like who can meet these requirements, right? Can you talk a little bit more about what that process looked like?
Yeah, sure. So my background, as mentioned, was construction. So I have a good lens on how projects are designed and procured, and how, as mentioned, the existing supply chain is disincentivized to work together to stand up these various technologies. So the first thing we needed to do was change the way that we designed and procured systems and technologies in the built environment, not only to make this economical, but just to make it possible. Because before, it was near impossible in the constructs that existed. And if it was possible, it was just so painful that nobody wanted to do it. So we then, when we started looking at the deployment methodology, the procurement methodology, and the execution methodology, we started in parallel, essentially building these sets of requirements. And to your point, I figured, why just go with traditional ways of doing things where we say, oh, let's use the building automation system and integrate lighting and a couple of other things. And there you go. That's your smart building platform, where, as Edi said earlier, in other industries, they've taken things so much further, and we've just sat back and watched literally every industry blow by us from a technological advancement perspective. And we've done nothing, right? We've just kept building buildings the same way we always have, kept retrofitting, kept operating the same way, because it's worked and everyone's made money and has done pretty well with it. But we thought, there's an opportunity here to really change the game. So we created a set of requirements, a 60, 70 some odd page document that I, took out the whip and made Edi and his team respond to, along with a whole bunch of other folks. And that included basically everything that I talked about: the ability to do command and control of all of these disparate systems, if command and control was appropriate, read write or read, depending on what made sense. On top of that, I wanted all these other IoT sensors to come in that were from a whole bunch of other different manufacturers offering a number of other different solutions. And I wanted the ability to integrate, enterprise and more human generated data into the fold at some point, so that we could start looking at what that would look like, as well as work order information and kind of our whole operational enterprise and everything we did in the building into a single platform. And by the way, I want to be able to get rid of you relatively quickly if I really need to. So the principles that this needs to be built on is, open APIs, open licensing, open maintenance and serviceability, just a foundation of openness. And on top of that, you need to do it for a cost that I can pay, that I can afford. Like this, just because I paint this enormous picture doesn't mean you can charge us, $1 a square foot for it. That's not going to fly. You can't charge us, multiple dollars a square foot for implementation. That's not going to fly either. As you remember from Realcomm, I put our numbers on the board, right? And I told Edi I was going to do it. And he's like, oh man. And I was like, look, we have to put this out there like this. The industry needs to know what these things cost and what they should cost. And so, to integrate a building, it's 16 cents to 25 cents a square foot up front, unless you've got a whole bunch of other crazy old stuff you're dealing with, in which case that plays to another 5 to 7.5 cents a square foot for uplifts. And then ongoing, you're looking at 4 to 8 cents a square foot based on your points. And if you can't make that business case work, then shame on you, right? So we had to make it real. We had to shoot for the moon, and we had to find a partner that was willing to come along for the ride with us and understand that, sorry, you're not going to get your $1 billion valuation on one building multiplied by the dream of doing 1,000 buildings in the same way. So this way you're going to generate $500 million in revenue a year off of 3 customers. Not going to happen, at least not with us. So you're going to get a small, reasonable amount fee per foot that makes the business case easy to justify. And it's up to you to scale it. KODE Labs or whoever, right? So that's the way we put it together. Arrogant as it may sound, it seems to be working out for us so far.
Hey guys, just another quick note from our sponsor, NexusLabs, and then we'll get back to the show. This episode is brought to you by Nexus Foundations, our introductory course on the smart buildings industry. If you're new to the industry, this course is for you. If you're an industry vet but want to understand how technology is changing things, this course is also for you. The alumni are raving about the content, which they say pulls it all together, and they also loved getting to meet the other students on the weekly Zoom calls and in the private chat room. You can find out more about the course at courses.nexuslabs.online. All right, back to the interview. I want to come back to you and hear about the responses, but Edi, what was it like to respond to this compared to other sort of RFPs?
There's the good and the bad, right? The good is that you have a potential client at the time who has, a clear, vision and view into what they're trying to do. And frankly, it was very similar to why we started the company to begin with. So it wasn't like we had to, do a whole lot of things to adapt to what Thano, QuadReal, and team, had envisioned, to be able to do. So that part was great. The other part is that, frankly, most other developers just don't move as fast. So now you have to, get on a rocket ship and you have to go, okay, like you said you could do this. You've been wanting to do this. You say you're ready. Time to really prove that you're ready and you're ready to go. So we're blessed that we have the best team on planet Earth, and they are, you throw anything at them and they take it as, this is their company as much as it is an Edi and Etrid company. So it's not, we're just structurally at the core, like we think that, look, building tech is one thing. If you don't have the right culture, if you don't have that right vision mentality, kind of all the pieces, coming together, it's really, really hard to go there. So yeah, is it easy when you get somebody that comes in and like what these guys did? They basically put us against some other people. They didn't give us first time. They didn't give us the project. Then they gave us one, and then we're like, okay, to us, it's it's on. It's competition. It's OS versus OS. Let's see who really has an OS. And we hit the ground running, and that turned into, and I'm sure Thano can touch into that more details there because he knows them better than I do. But from our perspective, it was, hey, we got one shot. We have to hit it out of the park, and at an incredible speed and quality, right? That really shows these guys that this could be done in the way that they really envisioned it. So that's what we did, and that has opened the doors to more. But again, we're fully aware of the fact that tomorrow it could be somebody else if we're not keeping up with it, and that's it's a fully transparent and open relationship. It is not, we're not friends at the end of the day. We have to deliver, or you don't deliver, you leave. But we also had to prove to a very technical group of people that they could actually remove KODE Labs and plug somebody else in at any one point in time, and it can be a seamless process. So that part is hard. That's not, you're like, look, you're hiring me, but part of the requirements is that I show you how you can unplug me. Like that's actually kind of, that's not what you're thinking of. To the earlier point that was made of value and growth and all these things, right? But I think again, we started this to be an enabler, to simplify the space, to make it really truly plug and play, to make it a real data play. And we're happy and ready publicly and otherwise to go out there. Like when Thano talked about sharing pricing, I mean, we were talking internally with Etrid and our team here, and we're like, this is next level stuff. But you signed up with a client who wants to quite literally change the industry and hopefully help others kind of come along with it. So that's what we signed up for. We'll stand behind it. We'll live with it. And we're frankly very excited to do it. And we're not looking to build a company on 10 buildings. We want a million of them.
I like the ability to unplug us as the requirement for the operating system. Anyone that's removed their OS from their machine in their life knows that is a possibility, but that you can't do for most building software firms. So Thano, what else did you, can you talk about the other responses? So you put this is just how I'm thinking of it. You put this impossible goal up there and said, who's going to come meet this? What else did you get? I just want to hear about that.
A lot of very expensive proposals is what we've got. A lot of folks saying, no, you want to do it this way. Trust me, look at what we can do. And we can build you a digital twin. And I'm like, that's exactly what we described. So what is your definition of a digital twin, if not the one that we've hacked together ourselves? So there was a lot of, and I came from the sales and business development. So I understand the idea of re-engineering the customer's vision to match the product that you've built. but that I wasn't having any of that. None of us were having any of it, right? So we got a lot of vendors in the community coming back and saying, look, look at what we have, and you're asking for this, but this is kind of what you really should be asking for. We got some of that, and some of those folks couldn't even respond to the RFP that we put out because it was just beyond their capabilities. And then we had some folks that came back and said, okay, like we're going to really give this a go. And they did. And there were some good responses, but at a cost that was, 4 or 5x on the capital and this similar multiplier on the ongoing recurring to maybe have it work. I guess it's a bit of a swing to pay that much money to see if it's going to work. And yeah, so that was really the kind of the two flavors of responses we got. We got either, no, this isn't what you want, re-engineer to align with the product that we want to sell you, or we can't do it, or I think we can do it and it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. And I'll save the names of the other vendors and I'll save their costs for over beer conversations with friends. But what I will say is that these gentlemen on the phone, or the gentleman on the phone, Eddie and his team, managed to show up at a cost that I budgeted for, which was scary, because when you say you're going to deliver something for the price range that I said, that I just mentioned, that 16 to 25 cents a foot or 4 to 8 cents a foot on an ongoing, and it's going to do all of this stuff, I would have looked like a goofball if these guys didn't show up and manage to deliver for us. So that's what we got from the market.
Let's talk about delivery. So first building you guys did this on, can you talk about like the process? Is it network infrastructure, and then, if I'm hearing you right, IoT sensors, and then building OS? Is that kind of the roadmap?
Yeah, so I'll give you guys a bit of this. I'll let Eddie talk to this as well from a deployment methodology perspective. But in a retrofit environment, we had a couple different projects going on in parallel. We had a retrofit building that we stood up, and then obviously a couple of net new construction buildings, one here in Canada at the Vancouver Post Office, which is Amazon's head office, that's 1.5 million square feet, and another with our partners at Stream in River South, Austin, Texas, which is about 400,000, give or take, square feet of office space, more now that we're changing some of the above ground parking levels into office, but that's neither here nor there. So we had those new projects as well as the retrofit projects. To speak to the retrofit projects, it's exactly that roadmap. Connectivity infrastructure at the foundation and is the core of what we do. Without that, there's not much you can do on top of it. IoT in parallel with systems being opened up and exposing that data over the infrastructure, whether wired or wireless, that we've deployed. And then on top of that, in this case, the KODE operating system platform that we put into place. Construction's a little bit different, just because of the deployment methodology, the fact that you're turning things on net new. There's a ton of vendor coordination that needs to happen. The actual nuts and bolts of it is still pretty similar, but just the way that you deploy, because it's a brand new building, the way that you interact with the vendors, because there's nothing existing, you've got a blank slate of which to make sure the data is appropriately structured, to make sure that the devices, the nomenclature and the metadata structures are appropriate, that we've got everything mapped out really, really well, and out of the gate is less of a lift from KODE side, and more of that's transferred back to the vendors as part of their delivery requirements for KODE so that they can consume it easily. But at the end of the day, it's pretty similar. Eddie, I don't know if you wanted to add on any of that.
I mean, I think it's pretty well summed up. And our view is always that if you get whatever company you're going to use, KODE Labs or whoever, involved sooner versus later, I think it helps just layer the foundation of like, hey, like if these expectations are met, which a lot of times what we run into is they get a bit overcomplicated at times, because it's almost like a hard concept to imagine everything coming together and being able to communicate. What do you mean you just hand off an API to my tenant app and then I can just pull whatever data you want? Like it's just frankly just been a crazy complicated process. And like I said earlier, the way we've attacked that is by bringing people that have been building software at scale before we started KODE Labs, to just allow for these things to be simple. We don't want to be in the business of being in a building for 2 years every time we need to deploy. So we want to go fast and we want to rock and roll, and we're not in the business of putting OS and trademarking it and, then thinking that's real, or filing some patent on some other thing and that's not the game we're in. We're in this because we think this should be an open space that helps, deliver a better experience and a better world, quite frankly, because we know the impact of real estate and just our planet and everything else that's happening. So that's our approach. That's what we do. And the last thing I'll say is that, you see a lot of companies that come out and raise a ton of money, and then they're able to go and make some, run some pilots and do some cool things for some interesting prices before prices then kind of, skyrocket. We're not, you haven't seen KODE Labs in the news about raising anything. This is a self-sufficient motor here that just goes and delivers.
Fascinating. All right. So you guys have said a couple things about this that kind of strike me as surprising. So you're talking about, I think Thano, when you and I talked, you said operators are loving it. And then this time you've said like the ease of use, both of you have said ease of use many, many times. And those two things are not typically common, right? So it's difficult to get a building operator to use new software, right? I think that's just a neutral statement that building operator, if I think about it, or facility manager, they're used to a building management system, however hard it is to use, and it's like their thing, right? And you're going to pry it out of their cold, dead fingers, right? So how did you make something? I guess Thano, let's start with you. How did you onboard, building operators and facility managers into this new way of thinking about operating the building? And then we'll go to you, Edi, on how you actually built a software that makes it easy to use.
Yeah, number one, they were part of the process, right? So, when we were doing some of those early RFPs for some of the QuadReal managed buildings here in Canada, we brought the operators in to look at some of the other solutions that were out there and what they thought. And they were really impressed with a few different solutions, but again, we're sitting here with KODE for a reason. So they were part of the early process. They also helped define the requirements when we started to deploy what was important to them. And the thing that I will say about KODE, and the reason we've been successful, is the time has been spent with the people that are using the platform, not with me, frankly, because I'm not the one running the building every day. I need to see a set of reports and I want to understand what things look at from a holistic perspective at a high level, but I'm not using it every day, right? So the weekly, if not more frequently, daily, in some cases, touch points with the operators when they say, hey, I need to see this piece of information. This one can go away. We don't really need to see that. And let's structure it like this. And then the turnaround time and the response to that, to have that stood up for them. And then moreover, what Edi was referring to earlier when he said, I found out a few minutes ago too, that one of our operators is going around and changing the layout of all of the lighting devices on the floor plans to exactly where they exist on the floor plan. And he's doing that himself because he wants to be able to not just get indicatively in this space or in this room roughly where the lights are. He wants to be able to kind of pinpoint exactly where these lights are. So when they do command and control, or when they have issues with operations, they know exactly where stuff is, and what they're touching on the screen is exactly represented in the physical environment. And that's what we're able to do with this solution. And that's what one of the main requirements was. So, how do we get them to like it, and how do we get them to move away from what they're used to? Number one, make them involved in the process. Number two, actually present them with a solution that's going to make their lives easier than the one that they have, which I think they've realized. Even things as simple as I can walk around with my mobile device and I can look at a platform and see every system. Some of the building automation systems beforehand had some mobile capabilities, but that didn't mean they could see lighting, security. That didn't mean they could see all the IoT. That didn't mean they could see this layer of analytics while they were in the field staring at a piece of equipment. I think that, if you're really going to make their lives easier, it's not so difficult to sell. And then on top of that, if you make it so that the keen operators, which we're very lucky in that our front lines are extremely sophisticated and passionate about what they do. So they're in this elbows deep in these platforms saying, moving lights around and changing the widgets that are on their dashboards because this is the way that they like to see them. And they can do that. Right. And that's what's important. That's what drives adoption, is making these solutions first of all, they were part of the selection. Second of all, it's actually solving problems and making their lives easy. And third of all, it's simple for them to customize, to use, and to change to the way that they see the best way to operate their building. And that may be different depending on the folks that are actually running the buildings and what their specialties are. So those are the key things for us.
Edi, what is it like from your perspective? And let me add real quick, making a software layer like this self-service is extremely, extremely rare. So I'd add that piece of it. But then the second piece of it is it's a true signal, so much noise in our industry, true signal to have someone like a building operator moving lights around digitally. I just want to from all the work that I do, that is a pretty impressive story. So how did you guys build
true.
this?
It's super simple. I just want to add one more point. It's an impressive story. Most people listening would be like, who cares? You can move the lights around. What, I can move, icons around on my desktop and rearrange them. It's not the same. When you're talking about IoT, the bridge between physical and digital, which is the reason that traditional IT organizations in real estate have a tough time figuring this out. And unless you understand that physical and digital bridge, the fact that just because you put a sensor in the ceiling and then you turn on your computer doesn't mean that the sensor is working the way you need to be able to understand and commission that sensor in the physical environment. You need to commission it in the virtual environment, and then you need to connect those things. It's not something that typically people, regular technologists have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, for your listeners, moving the lights around on a floor plan is a really cool story, as benign as it may sound.
Yeah. People are like, are you crazy, James? No, I'm not crazy. That is a crazy thing. Oh, man.
James, to answer your question from our perspective, when we started building the platform, the intent was that this thing would be a self-serve platform. Otherwise, we're in the wrong space, and we're not. This wasn't a thing of start building something that kind of looks like this other thing, and then somebody asks for it, and then we go back and restructure and rebuild. It's never been the case. And again, I keep saying this time and again, I tell people this all of the time. What we're talking about at any one point in time, we are happy to show it quite literally to everybody on planet Earth, because we think that the more of us out there, the faster these buildings get automated, and the faster we're able to reach these goals that everybody is talking about reaching, and I think really genuinely wants to reach. So when we started, when you think UI UX, right? To me, it starts with the layer of, look, you can't build any one thing for any one space if you don't understand the space thoroughly. So understanding the space thoroughly means you understand how it operates, you understand the impact it has to a visitor, to a tenant, to somebody that lives there, depending on its use, to somebody that works there, understand the financials of it, what impacts what and how that works, what goes to CAM, what goes to the landlord, there's just a lot that's in the space that you need to understand before you start building something that you're going to call an operating system that's going to help you operate your portfolio. That's a huge statement. We are fully aware of that, which is why, again, you didn't hear a whole lot of noise from KODE Labs until 12, 14 months ago. We have a platform that is true and tried, and 100% of our client base, 100%, not 99.9, 100% of our client base is available to speak to about our platform. Thano happens to be on this one, but literally anybody that has ever used our platform continues to use and scale with it. So, but again, it goes back to step one. It's what are you trying to do and why? We didn't set out to do this thing so we could get stuck in a QuadReal portfolio for the rest of our lives. As much as we love QuadReal, it's great, but if we can enable their people to go do what they need to do and take this on and go do more with us, and we have channel partners that take our platform that work with a ton of other clients, take our platform and they are the servicing arm of a client's portfolio, they're able to do this self-serve on their own. And when they do have an issue, it is about that, offering that experience that, Thano touched on, which is, we have a team that's dedicated to nothing but making sure that the people using this on the front lines are heard every day. Response time, 15 minutes, not 60, not 45, not 30, 15 minutes response time. And that's a level of service that our whole team expects from ourselves first and foremost, right? So that's what's led to, I think, people loving the platform. And again, an operating system should be one that you shouldn't want to, just step out of, which is why they have a hard time stepping out of the ones they're in today, to your point, right? Like, as bad as it may be, I'm used to this. So now you have to like deliver by 1,000x better to get them to come onto your operating system, and then keep them there means that you have to, continue to push the limit there. So we're just fortunate that I think when we started with the right thing in mind. At least it seems that way, and it's proven over time. And we have a team that just really understands how to build software in, that's 2021, 2022 now, and not continue to build on the same old graphics. Like I can have a whole conversation about graphics.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, that's fascinating that you said that from the get-go. Let's make this self-service. Let's make this able, anybody can operate it. Thano, that speaks to one of the business cases that you talked about earlier, which is leverage building operators across more square footage. You also talked to me, I think, personally about service contracts. Can you talk about how this software layer maybe makes service contracts and that process more efficient?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's no surprise that anyone who's operated a building or a portfolio of buildings of any size requires mechanics, requires electricians, requires service people to come and maintain pieces of equipment on a set schedule or on a time and material as needed basis when things don't work so well. We've relied on this model forever, and there's been no real catalyst to make a change. We've got more advanced systems now in building automation that gives us some visibility into how things are operating, but a lot of it's reactive. So we feel that if we have at scale a better understanding of how our pieces of equipment are operating across a portfolio, that we can change the methodology in which we engage in service. So now it's not on a schedule, it's based on what the data is telling us from those devices on how they're operating, run through a machine learning or AI algorithm that has modeled its operation based on 1 million pumps that are exactly the same, that are all 25 horsepower, that all operate this way, to identify anomalies so that we can identify when service is required before it's required. And our service contracts, our traditional maintenance every month service contracts, go away, and they're driven by data, which may, require more frequent visits, or ideally the hypothesis is that the visits will be as needed, and by being as needed will extend the life of the devices and delay the capital deployment required to replace them. So there is a significant change in which we can engage with our service providers based on this data at scale, understanding devices at scale. So not just how this one pump, how this one fan coil, how this one VAV box operates in this building, but how this manufacturer of fan coil operates across our entire estate and what that means to us. So there's lots of opportunities there from a purchasing perspective moving forward, having a better understanding and inventory of all of the devices that we have across the portfolio. And then the last bit that I'll share is, at some point when you've got enough scale in a region, maybe the model starts to change where you insource some of these services. You don't just have to continually outsource services to service providers when you've got enough scale and you have enough information to understand that, if we hire one or two kind of technicians of whatever skill set you'd like to name, we can bring those folks in and we can actually save money and have them focus on our portfolio, leverage this information to either deliver service or maintenance or repair type of requests, because we understand the scale in which they're coming in, and we understand the scale in which we have. And we've moved from, operate this building next door to this building as if they were in different countries, to operate these two buildings next to each other as if they were next to each other, and share inventory and share resources and share information. So that's one of the, and again, this, we talk about what's real and what isn't. That's not real just yet, but we do have a path towards it because of all the things that we've talked about so far.
Fascinating. All right, we're running out of time a little bit. So I want to zoom in on just you mentioned command and control, right? A lot of people say command and control like it's a crazy futuristic thing, and I want to demystify that a little bit. So what I've heard when you guys say command and control, and when you talked about it, Thano, at Realcomm, it sounds like it's functional testing of equipment, right? So the ability for, instead of commissioning agent taking the controls contractor out and they both, override things through a whole sequence, you just run the whole sequence remotely from the operating system, right? So that's one. It sounds like optimized start, it sounds like, and scheduling, that kind of thing. So standardizing that across all the building systems, but then across the portfolio as well. What else are those the two main use cases for command and control? Can you talk about more?
Yeah, I mean, from an enhanced command and control for sure, but even from its most basic form, when we look at how we procure these systems now, we're not procuring a whole bunch of different disparate software packages. We're not, because we don't need to. We do have redundancy in place from a risk mitigation perspective. If anyone blew up the redundant data centers that KODE hosted their cloud platform in, and we lost the platform, we still have enough functionality that building operators can go into the systems individually and make sure the building still runs and operates. But there's no use for us to buy multiple different graphics packages with a whole bunch of whiz-bang capabilities in all of these different siloed systems and pay for licensing and pay for upgrades and pay for this and pay for that if we don't need to. So at its core and most basic, command and control is just that: commanding and controlling the devices that we have, regardless of the system they are, in a single platform, but also having the fallback capability of going locally if we need to, if we lose connectivity or if there's some sort of issue. And then to your point, beyond that, those are the big use cases, is being able to command and control multiple systems from a single platform in relationship to one another autonomously to realize those outcomes. So whether it's enhancing the way that we commission buildings on substantial completion, or commission them every day if we want, really, to run these sequences and make sure that they're working the way that they're supposed to be working. Optimize the buildings based on data coming from the weather, based on system information, based on occupancy of how many people are there, and change the startup time of a building every day to make sure we hit the set points in the lease, but maybe we start talking to and again, something that hasn't happened yet, but may, and we'd like to drive towards that, talking to the tenants and saying, hey, we've got requirements in your lease to hit certain temperatures or to start up at this time, but why don't we look at doing it based on occupancy and see what that saves you, because you're all sub-metered, everyone gets their own utility bill every month. Let's see what that means if we look at some more data parameters to drive comfort in your space, but also occupancy and carbon reduction. So command and control means some very basic things, and it can mean a lot more complicated, or I shouldn't say complicated, but more sophisticated things as well.
Totally. And Edi, what are you seeing across your whole client base in terms of this space?
I think in addition to what you guys touched on already, for us, it's command and control. It goes way beyond just the building, base systems that this is traditionally we've heard, FTT and FDD and OSS and all that. And it's great and extremely useful tools and ones we also provide. But it goes beyond that now when we talk about creating these experiences where you feel like, talk about the metaverse, right? Like I'm in it, but I don't even know I'm in it. Like it needs to be like this seamless experience. And that's what we're driving towards. We talk about, we have, like River South, I'll touch on that since that was the building that, won the smartest building here, but there are a multitude of different buildings with, QuadReal, but others now as well, where command and control also could mean access. Like, when I scan into the garage, I want to know, I think have that communicate to the elevator so that there's an elevator already heading down and I'm not sitting around waiting for 4 minutes, on the elevator, so that the building itself is more efficient with regard to how people move. So there's a ton of other use cases like that, command and control. If you have a good application where you can send people, a push notification that says, are you coming to work tomorrow? And what time do you plan on being to work tomorrow? Or in the morning? And depending on the answer, that triggers a whole lot of things downstream, like the temperatures, like the systems on, like the, making sure your parking is saved. We're doing a project in Atlanta that is not a QuadReal related project for a huge corporation, their headquarters. That's a use case that gets enabled literally using KODE. So I just want to make sure, like, when we talk about, again, an operating system or what KODE is, yes, it is the operator's tool to operate the building, but it is so much more than that. It is that data hub. It is that, ability to deliver data to any one place. And if you want it to work autonomously, you have the ability to do that by literally coding in an API. You guys talked about lighting and moving lighting around. You can, like, that is something, to me, that's like to really the whole KODE Labs team. That is like the simplest thing on planet Earth, because so you have occupancy sensors, and now you have 75 other buildings that you want to install them on, and you've tied the API. Like just go plug the occupancy sensor, open up your app, and literally plop it where you need it to go, and then it starts generating and delivering data. Like, as long as the hardware itself. This is why at KODE Labs we are strong believers that there are some phenomenal hardware companies, starting with the big guys, your Siemens, your JCI, everybody else. Make good hardware. But the software has just not really been their specialty. And while sure, you're a big company, you can go on an acquisition mode and you can acquire and try and kind of patch it together. Like, that's like, they make great hardware, but their interests are not aligned with you, the owner, with regard to allowing you the openness and the scalability that we've been talking about today, and that's talked about all the time. You ask owners, they talk about, I want open this, open that, and then you ask who they work with, and you're like, yeah, no, that really sounds like it's very open, and you're going to deliver on all these things. The last thing I want to touch on, which is really, really important, and I actually think it's the most important piece from an educational standpoint in our space, and that is that you, the owner, need to see beyond just, well, tenants are responsible for energy, so why am I like spending a bunch of money? Like, you have a fiduciary duty to your tenants to actually make sure that their spaces are efficient. By the way, if you use that data correctly, which some, shall not mention their name, are using, you can use that data to now pitch your building against the building across the street as, look, yes, I may charge you $1.50 more a foot, but your overall net costs are actually going to be lower, and you can use the space. You talk about attracting talent and all these things. So I just think there's this piece of like what I, as an owner of a building, have to do versus like, well, you should be doing everything and anything you can to deliver the amazing experiences and efficiencies to your tenants, because if used correctly, you can generate more revenue. And we have a real life use case that will go actually public here soon, where there's a building that is generating over 20% more than what the rate that the building was underwritten at, because it is a fully autonomous, smart building with all of these amazing use cases and efficiencies in place, and it's being pitched in that, in that light. These are the things that I don't think are talked about enough. But again, to us, this is how you quantify what you're delivering. Like, you don't need to listen to KODE Labs ever. Go talk to any one of our clients. Here's real case studies, and here's the things that you can touch and feel. So
awesome. That's a good place to end up. I like that little sermon at the end there. Thanks, Edi. Thano, any last closing remarks in the same vein?
Listen, I don't know if I can follow that up and articulate it as well as Edi did. It was almost, his inspirational, guy at the platform addressing the masses type of closeout. But what I will say is that this stuff is real. Like I said on the stage at RealCom, we know what it costs, we know what it can deliver. And now it's a matter of getting the industry's head wrapped around actually doing it with folks and vendors, because it takes a village. It's not just code, it's code and the partners and the other systems that are integrating, and the IoT and the other various platforms that deliver on unique value propositions that are required to stand up these solutions. And then go do it and stop talking about it, because we've been listening to the same story since I started focusing on smart buildings, I don't know, however many years ago. It's always been, that story that Edi told, the elevator comes down and greets you because it knows that you're in the parking lot. I mean, we've been talking about that forever. And you know who's done it? 0 people up until very recently. So stop talking, start doing. The tools are in place, the vendors exist, the folks that understand how to bring this stuff to bear exist. So start doing it. Don't let the community make it sound more complicated than it needs to be, as Edi was talking about earlier. This stuff's not rocket science. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, and I've managed to figure it out, which says quite a bit. So, if I can do it, anybody can do it, sort of thing. But yeah, it's just some simple process. It's a few folks in the right seats on the bus, and you'll be able to get to the same outcomes that we've been talking about for some time, but actually deliver on them and demonstrate measurable results.
Awesome. Well, thank you too for coming on the show. I learned a lot and I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
James.
All right, friends, thanks for listening to this episode of the Nexus Podcast. For more episodes like this and to get the weekly Nexus newsletter, which, by the way, readers have said is the best way to stay up to date on the future of the smart buildings industry, please subscribe at nexuslabs.online. You can find the show notes for this conversation there as well. Have a great day.